All right. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time you are watching this video, whether you're watching live or whether you are watching the recording. I welcome you and I thank you for taking this time and congratulate you on taking this time out of your day to learn a little bit more about self-improvement and some of these different techniques that I found beneficial for myself and that I use with the private clients that I work with, sometimes also in groups, because our minds are so powerful, but we often learn more about how to run our technology than we do the most powerful computer in the world, which is right here between our two ears. So my goal is to educate people about how their brains work and how they can work with their brains more effectively with the tools, the resources, and the knowledge that we have now about how the brain works and how we can take more command over our brains. And so I'm going to recap today a little bit about the 4 different modalities that I taught about earlier in this series, self-improvement series: hypnosis, EFT, NLP, and PQ, or mental fitness. So those are the things that I've taught on. Those are the things that I'm going to recap today. And so with the hypnosis is basically, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions that people have about hypnosis. It's probably the main one or the only one of these 4 that I just listed that people are familiar with. The rest of them have really been developed, EFT and NLP, since the 70s, but hypnosis has been around since Mesmer really started it, and that was in the 17th century. So basically, hypnosis is an altered state of awareness where we can tune out the outside world, tune more into the inner world, and go into a deeper level of our brain frequency patterns, which is alpha and theta. And this becomes the super learning level of our brain. So when we're in the alpha and the theta levels of our brain is much more receptive, and we are able to access more of the unconscious memories or thoughts, programs that are stored there in the subconscious mind. So in that state, our brain becomes more receptive to information, and we have more ability to recall information that maybe the conscious mind isn't as aware of. So sometimes hypnosis is used to help to get to memories that the conscious mind isn't recalling. So a lot of times that's done in sort of forensic hypnosis. But I'm not going to be talking about that today. And what I deal with is using these tools like hypnosis to help people to create behavior change and optimize their capabilities to achieve what they want to achieve or perform better in something that they're doing. So this altered state of awareness allows our brain to receive information more quickly, more easily, and store that information in a more permanent way. And ideally in a way that becomes a new conditioned response. So a lot of what we're doing through the day is based on the old conditioning that we've created, the old programs that we've created and that are stored at the subconscious, and that just sort of automatically happen through the day. Just like driving your car, for example. At first, you had to learn that. You had to think consciously about everything that you were doing, all the steps of driving your car, right? And eventually, through repetition, doing it enough times, your subconscious mind recognized the patterns of the things that you were doing and made it unconscious. So now you don't have to think so much consciously about what you're doing. You just get in the car and, you know, your brain fires off all the steps that you need to do, all the things you need to think about and pay attention to. So the benefit of helping people to get into the alpha and the theta levels is that we can learn so much information so much more quickly and easily, and again, make it more automated. The alpha and theta levels are the levels of the brain that we're in mostly when we're children. So when we first start off in life, we don't have much of a conscious faculty. We don't, and even that area of the brain hasn't been built up yet. So we're just like giant sponges. So if you've ever been around kids, you might sometimes marvel at what they've picked up on and what they can remember. I know my nephew could read a book without knowing how to read, because he just simply memorized what was said on each page, and he was looking at the pictures and he remembered the story, and so he could say the story because his mom read it so many times to him. And so he wasn't really reading, but it looked like he was reading because he just remembered so much. The detriment to us learning so quickly and easily when we're children in that way is that we don't have filters. So a lot of garbage gets in along with the good stuff. And then oftentimes that garbage causes us problems. So we've got some good information in there that we're operating off of, but also sometimes we've got some not so great information that we're operating off of. But then oftentimes we don't know how to change it. We don't know how to get rid of that old information. Sometimes we don't even know what old information, what old programs are in there that is causing us to do what we're doing that is not in our best interest, right? We're like, I don't know why I'm doing that, or I shouldn't be doing that, but I can't stop myself. So hypnosis basically helps to get you back into that super learning state where you can receive messages, either ones that you create for yourself. So if you're doing self-hypnosis, or ones that are on maybe an audio recording. It's a hypnotherapist has made an audio recording, you maybe purchased it, and you're just listening to those predetermined suggestions. Or you can work one-on-one with a professional hypnotherapist like myself, that personalizes the suggestions and the outcomes and the visualizations and things that are relative to whatever changes you want to make, whatever improvements you want to make. As far as the uses of hypnosis, it's really very versatile. So we can use it with emotional things. We can use it with physical things, pain management, for example. Stress management is a big use. Weight loss, and how hypnosis helps with weight loss is essentially it helps to change the habits or establish better habits that are relative to your body gaining or losing weight. So changing food preferences, helping the brain to turn off the hunger mechanism or the emotional eating mechanism, so that we're eating only when we're hungry, stopping when we've eaten the right amount instead of overeating, choosing better foods, having a better attitude about exercise so that we're exercising, moving more frequently. Oftentimes, a lot of my clients are sort of hooked on sodas, and so helping them to eliminate the need, want, or desire of soda, either greatly decreasing it so they're not drinking it very much at all, or they find that they don't like the taste of the soda anymore. And we increase the desire for water, and they're just naturally thirsty and they're drinking more water. So it's about the behaviors that are relative to weight loss and weight gain that we help to either establish or eliminate. Smoking cessation as well. And sometimes that's cigarettes. Sometimes people come to me for vaping, sometimes for cigars, sometimes it's for marijuana. Sometimes it's a combination of those things. Alcohol, I've worked with people for alcohol moderation as well as cessation. Some people can do alcohol moderation. I've had some success with that, but I do a good screening process with people to really identify whether, alcohol moderation is a likely and healthy goal for them, or whether they really are showing signs of, great addiction to the alcohol. I don't really work with hard drugs. I do work with marijuana, but not hard drugs. Usually refer people out for that because that's a whole other animal. Trauma, some types of trauma I'll work with, especially if somebody's been through trauma and they've already gone to a regular therapist. And sometimes I'll work in conjunction because I can do some things with these mindset tools that a traditional therapist doesn't do. But I need to make sure that that person is in a good, stable place. So it might have been a trauma from a long time ago. They've done a lot of work on it with a traditional counselor, but these tools will help to just really clear out the emotional residue of those things. Because it's not, from whatever the trauma is, it's not the memory itself that's the problem. It's the emotions that are attached to the experience that re-triggers the negative responses with it. Okay, so And EFT, which I'll talk about in a minute, is a really, really great tool to utilize for trauma release, and has been shown to be much quicker and much more effective than older traditional models, talk therapy, CBT, etc. And then I taught in the hypnosis class about the 3-to-1 self-hypnosis technique, counting from 3, 2, 1, taking a deep breath in, holding, and then breathing out to 1. So it's the tension, relaxation, the counting, and the breath, that it's a combination of that in the 3-to-1 technique. And then I offered the deep peace conditioning hypnosis process as a freebie, and a quiz that would go with that to help you to determine what hypnotic personality type you are, and if hypnosis would be a likely tool to utilize. So I'll pause there for a moment before I go on to EFT. Are there any questions that we have from anybody in the audience that they wanted to ask? Nope. Okay, great. So we'll move on. The second thing that second class that I taught on was EFT, emotional freedom technique. Is also known as tapping, because traditionally we're tapping on these acupressure points, and it looks like a kind of a weird, funky technique. Sometimes people are like, oh, you know, I'm going to look like a weirdo when I do that, or they feel a little bit self-conscious about it. But when people actually give it an opportunity to practice it, to try it out, they can really see the benefits of doing the EFT. It's rare when I have a client who doesn't respond well to the EFT, but it does happen occasionally, which is another reason why I have these different tools that I'm trained in and that I utilize with clients. Not every technique is going to be great with every client. So I try to determine which techniques are going to be more likely to be helpful for them, and that they're open to using and that they're finding benefit from. So EFT stands for emotional freedom techniques, and basically it's acupressure stimulation of these particular stress points on the body that is based on what Chinese acupuncture has mapped out through the thousands of years that acupuncture has been around. And what was once theory from acupuncture is now being validated through instrumentation that we have that measures that these acupressure points actually do have a different energetic frequency to them than the skin zones around them. So they have this different frequency, and when they're stimulated through tapping, rubbing, applying a pulsing pressure, or sticking a needle in it, it changes what's happening in the brain. It changes the activation centers in the brain. It changes your what chemicals are being released by the brain and by the body. So the blood, a blood test before doing the EFT and after doing the EFT, you'll see different elements of hormones and chemicals in the blood. Immunofactors are released when we do the tapping. So the immune system is boosted when people do the tapping. Chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol, which are released when we're in any kind of fear or stress mode. If they're present before doing the tapping in the blood, after the tapping, we see that they're eliminated or greatly reduced. And there's more chemicals and hormones of dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins. So the stimulation of these points actually changes our brain and our body chemically as well. We can see different activation in different organs of the body also, and that's acupuncture works with that a little bit more deeply than the EFT does. And the calming of the activation of the amygdala area of the brain, which is right here in the back, the hindbrain, also known as the primitive brain. This is where the fight or flight mechanism gets operated from to protect us from any perceived threat, and produces the adrenaline, cortisol to give us energy for the fight or the run. And it's also where conditioned responses come from. So when we find ourselves sort of automatically responding to things, that's coming from back here. Fears and phobias are a great example of that. where physiologically the brain instantly has a change. Heart rate increases, respiration increases, digestion decreases in preparation again for the fight or the run. And when we stimulate these acupressure points, we see through brain scans that the highlighting of the amygdala calms down, and the area behind the forehead called the prefrontal cortex actually starts to light up more. And this area of the brain is where those chemicals are produced from, the endorphin, serotonin, dopamine. And this area of the brain is responsible for creativity, problem solving, logic, reason, new ways of thinking. And so when we're in a stress mode, oftentimes our brain kind of freezes and we're not thinking effectively. And after the stress is gone, then ideas pop into our head. Like, oh, I could have done this, or I should have done this, or we're trying to think of an answer to something and we can't because we're kind of stressed out about it. And when the brain calms down, then suddenly it just kind of pops in. But we can learn how to actually flip the switches in our brains, get us out of fight or flight and out of the restrictive mode of the hindbrain, and activate the more the greater functionality of our brain through the prefrontal cortex by stimulating these points. So it's a quick way to begin to do that and actually flip switches in your brain and reprogram your brain. So I demonstrated how to do a couple of different EFT techniques, the tap and breathe, where we're tapping on each of the points and just doing 2 to 3 deep breaths in and out as we're doing that. And then I taught the original technique that was developed by Gary Craig, called the basic technique or the original formula, tapping on the karate chop point, saying a setup statement that's relative to what we're experiencing. So it's some emotion like anger, or if I'm working with people for cravings, urges for food or cigarettes or some other substance. And we identify what that is and what degree we're feeling that urge or that emotion, 0 to 10. We give a rating of a 0 to 10 on the scale. And then we do the tapping. And then after we go through the rounds of that, we check back in with our emotional state or that urge or craving, and then identify how strong it feels now after one round of the tapping. Give it a number. Maybe it was an 8 when we started. After a round, now it feels like a 6. And anything higher than a 5, then we continue to do another round and see if we can get it down even more. The goal is to get under a 5 because that level of emotion is less likely to create the response. So one of the things that I explained is that we might have a bunch of thoughts going through our mind every day, but we don't act on all of them. We act on the ones that have some kind of strong emotion, and the stronger the emotion, the more likely we are to act on it. So if we can get the emotion to back down that's driving the behavior that we don't want to be engaging in, then it's less likely that we feel this more compulsion, this need to act on it. So we want to get it to a low level. Under a 5 is usually a low enough level where we don't feel so much like we have to respond to that. And the lower we can get it, the better. So we can often go all the way to a 0 where whatever that emotion was that got triggered is totally gone in this moment. So we can use the EFT in the moment, what we call emergency or first aid EFT, where something got triggered within you, behavior that you don't want to engage in, or some kind of negative emotion that you're kind of getting stuck in, or that's likely to lead to some negative behavior, to clear that in the moment. But we can also go back to past memories, like I was talking about before, like a trauma, and deactivate the emotions that are still wrapped up in that memory, because it's not the memory that's the issue, it's the emotional residue that keeps, it's sort of like a wound that keeps getting picked open. And so what we're doing is we're fully healing the wound, and so it doesn't, we can bang it and it's not gonna reopen. So just like if we have a lamp on in a room, right, the light bulb is creating the light, but the light bulb needs the electricity going to it to feed it for the light to go on. So if we want the light to go off, we can either remove the light bulb, or we can remove the energy source to the light bulb by unplugging it from the wall or flipping off the switch. the light bulb is still there, but it's not activated anymore. It's not lit up. We don't have to get rid of the light bulb to let the light go out. So we don't have to get rid of the memory. The memory can still be there, but it's not being fed anymore with the emotions. So it doesn't cause the problems anymore. And so EFT is really good. We can use hypnosis for that as well, but I find EFT is just a much quicker path to doing that for people, and things that people can learn to do on their own. Self-hypnosis is a little bit, it's a little bit more challenging to do, and you can't do it anytime, any place, whereas the EFT, you can pretty much anytime, any place, be stimulating some of those points and help with that. So it can work on emotions. It can help to diminish negative thoughts or beliefs. It can help to clear the emotional residue of past memories and traumas. And it can also work with physical things, especially headaches, very simple. Oftentimes people, when they've got any kind of pain or headaches, the EFT can help to, again, diminish or eliminate the pain that they're experiencing. So those are some typical uses of the EFT. So I'll pause here for a moment again and ask, does anybody have any questions about the EFT? Okay, great. And then the giveaway that I mentioned in the EFT class is an EFT cheat sheet that shows you exactly the process, like where are the points to tap on the hands, the upper area of the body. It's 8 to 12 main points that we use. And then, what do we do while we're tapping the points? And there's a couple of different things that I taught. So on that cheat sheet, there'll be the instructions so that people can go through it, practice it on their own, see what kinds of results they get from it. The third technique that I talked about was Nlp, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which essentially translates as the language of the mind. And it's similar to how computers actually operate. And we found that there are general principles and rules by which our brains are coded and retract and respond to information and coding. So NLP basically teaches these rules that we've discovered through the originators, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, developed in the 70s. And they develop it by looking at modeling. So they looked at the thoughts and the behaviors of people who were very successful in their fields of endeavor, such as Virginia Satir, a psychologist and counselor, Milton Erickson, who's a hypnotherapist, counselor, people in business, very successful people in business. So they studied very successful people in different fields to find what were the commonalities about how they thought, how their brains worked, how they acted to things, how they responded to things, and sort of came up with these general rules about how our brains do that, how our brains think, and how our brains remember things and pull up memories or experiences, and how we respond to that. So it's basically teaching people some of that coding and teaching them how to change the code if the code is producing results that they're not happy with. So there's a lot of different NLP techniques, but a very simple one that most people have heard of is if you're speaking in front of a group of people and you're feeling really nervous, imagine them all in their underwear. Or imagine them all wearing Bozo the Clown noses. Okay, so it just changes the construct of what you're visualizing. So those are some visual recodes, and when you change the things that are processing along with the emotional response that you're getting, it starts to change it. It's sort of like taking a record that has a particular pattern in it, and when the needle goes that particular pattern that's been created, it creates a particular sound, and that particular sound creates a specific response within you, right? So if you're listening to the soothing music, generally you're going to have a soothing response to it. if you're listening to this upbeat music and the pattern of that on the record is this more upbeat and pulsing kind of pattern, that's gonna influence you in a different way. Now we take that record and we change the pattern in some way by speeding it up or slowing it down or playing it in reverse or putting some scratches, some deep scratches into it. So as it's playing, it skips and it interrupts the original pattern. And therefore you can't respond in the same way because the pattern is not the same as what your brain and even your nervous system has gotten used to. And so the response is going to change. So I teach people how to do some of that, scratching the record, changing the program, speed it up, slow it down, introduce in new images in your head, new sounds, or change the sound in some way, make it louder, make it softer, make it silent, speed it up, slow it down, reverse the sound. The movement, if there's any movement with a particular behavior, we teach people how to change the movement. Again, speed up the movement, slow the movement down, do the movement in reverse, add a different movement into it. It's all just changing that pattern. And so you trained your brain to, in a particular pattern, from A to B response, like trigger A creates B response. And it's actually neural pathways in your brain that have been physiologically created, that when that trigger is present, you train the brain to put the signal down this particular deep groove pathway and create this particular response. But what the NLP essentially does is it helps to change that pattern, and it brings it to different directions or adds things into it, and then it's not going to create the same response anymore. Okay, so that's a very simplified explanation of NLP, what it's about, kinds of things we can do with it. There's a really good book. Actually, I first learned NLP by following Tony Robbins, and it's Awaken the Giant, I think, and listening to tapes of his. And he learned NLP, but then he changed the name because it's trademarked to neuroassociative conditioning. But that's where I first got my start with NLP. So any of his stuff is really good if you want to learn a little bit more about NLP and some of these different techniques and some things that you could try on your own. And then the NLP, the New Technology of Achievement, is another book that I use a lot. And that is pretty simple to read and understand, and has the particular exercises for you to go through with some of the different techniques. And then I taught the resource organizer technique, which is basically doing some of the brain scramble of a particular food or substance that you're highly drawn to or attracted to that you don't want to be so attracted to anymore. And so I taught the resource organizer technique in that video. And it's something, again, that people can utilize for themselves. It was something really helpful for me to change my attraction to certain kinds of foods. So now when I see them, my brain just kind of automatically does that process, and I don't see them in the same way, and I don't create the same emotional response about them in the same way. So I'll pause here and ask if there are any questions about the NLP. Okay, great. And then finally, the positive intelligence, which is also sometimes referred to as PQ because it's your positive intelligence quotient. Some people have heard of EQ, your emotional intelligence quotient, but this is PQ, positive intelligence quotient. And it's basically teaching mental fitness and your ability to respond more favorably, more effectively to life's challenges, setbacks, disappointments, unexpected changes, and conflict. Being able to bounce back more quickly and easily from those kinds of things, and be able to respond to those things in a more effective, productive way instead of what we call self-sabotaging ways. It helps us to improve our own performance. It helps us to improve our well-being, our peace of mind, and our healthy habits. It helps us with leadership roles, whether that's leadership as a parent or a leadership in your work, or maybe a professional organization if you're a leader in that, and helps us with our relationships and improving our relationships. So teaching the mental fitness through positive intelligence is teaching three basic mental muscles to build to be able to respond more quickly and easily and beneficially to life's challenges. Okay. And so that is learning how to identify your own particular dominant inner saboteurs. The main one of which is the judging ourselves, others, or a situation as bad, wrong, or not good enough. So that inner critical voice, we're criticizing ourselves or we're criticizing others, or we're judging a situation as bad or wrong or problematic in some way. And then we tend to respond to it in a very different way if we're looking at it as something bad or a problem than if we look at it through what we call the sage perspective, which is where could there be an actual gift or opportunity in this thing? Because there can always be something beneficial that we can draw out of even the hardest experience. So it's teaching you how to identify your saboteurs. The main one is the judge, and then there's 9 accomplice saboteurs. They each have a certain persona, like the controller, the pleaser, the victim, the hyperachiever, the avoider, the hyper-rational, the hyper-vigilant, and the stickler. I think I got them all. I might have missed one. But those descriptions can pretty much bring an understanding of what that persona type is like especially the controller, the victim, the pleaser, the avoider, that's the procrastination, the sticklers, the, perfectionists. And so there's actually a great assessment, a saboteur assessment that you can take. And again, I talked about that in that video, and people, I shared the link so you can take the saboteur assessment and see what your dominant saboteurs are and how they affect you, how they affect others around you, and how they affect the kinds of results that you're getting in your life. And so you can recognize them, and when you recognize them, you can stop them in their tracks and not follow through on their way of dealing with things, which end up having a negative boomerang effect. So that's the first mental muscle, identifying and stopping the hijacking of the saboteurs. The second one is being able to move into the sage mode. And that's that prefrontal cortex. So the judge and the saboteurs are coming from here, the primitive brain, which is basically about trying to protect you in the best way that they established when you were young. And then activating more of the prefrontal cortex through the sage, and the ability to use the sage perspective. So when any challenge comes up, teaching yourself how to go to where's the solution, where's the gift, where's the opportunity, instead of going, oh, this is a problem, right? This is a bad thing. I have to move away from it, or I have to resist it, or whatever. And go into sage mode of, okay, there's a possible gift or opportunity here. How can I find one or create one? And then helping to access this area of the brain, the sage perspective and the sage capabilities of responding to things through the 5 sage powers, which are empathy, compassion for self, others, or the situation, curiosity, exploring what's really going on and other ways to look at it, awe and wonder, exploration, innovation, which is about brainstorming, coming up with new ideas about how to respond to a situation instead of the old way that maybe you used to respond to it. And the fourth one is navigation, which is approaching it through what are your values and what's really important to you, and thinking from the future, looking back, how would you like to say that you responded to the situation? And then the 5th power of the sage is clear-headed, laser-focused action, like the warrior in battle, who's able to not get all wrapped up in the chaos, but is able to stay focused and know exactly what he needs to do, where he's going, and just take that action without all this turmoil in the head. It's just like, just take the action. So those are the 5 powers of the sage that we teach about. And then the bridge between the getting from the saboteurs to getting to being the sage and responding that way, the bridge between the two is the third mental muscle, which is our what we call PQ reps, our self-command muscle, learning how to rein in our thoughts and our emotions. And like I was talking about with the EFT is actually a way to do PQ reps. But the PQ reps that we teach are short 10-second mindfulness-based exercises that are tied into any of our senses. So for 10 seconds, you focus fully with full attention and awareness on something that you can hear, or something that you're looking at, or something that you can touch, or some kind of movement that you can do, or something that you're tasting, or something that you're smelling. The 3 dominant ones we do are something that we're looking at, something that we're touching, or some movement, or something that we're listening to. It was such attention that we drone out all the other thoughts. And those 10 seconds of being in the present moment with your senses calms the amygdala, activates the prefrontal cortex, and you shift from saboteur way of thinking and responding, and you help to shift more to the sage perspective and the sage powers and be able to respond in that way. Okay, so that's what we teach in the positive intelligence, and how people can build up those mental muscles in as little as 6 weeks of intensive practice. And then after that, it's just a matter of maintenance of about 15 minutes a day. And we compare this to physical fitness, and mental fitness is like physical fitness. You can't just do 1 rep at the gym every few days and expect to build a muscle up. You have to do some intense repping in a short period of time to build that up. And then in order for you to maintain that muscle and not have it atrophy and go away, just a little bit of maintenance, but you don't need the same intensity that you did in the very beginning. So we have actually a 7-week course that we bring people through to learn these techniques and practice them through using an app that gives people prompts throughout the day to practice some of the different techniques and muscles. And over that 7-week period, they get that built up. And then it's just a matter of maintenance of about 15 minutes a day, spread out throughout the day, of like 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minutes of doing those kinds of PQ reps. All right, so that's what the positive intelligence and mental fitness is about. And the freebie that goes with that is that saboteur assessment that I give the link to. So you can do your assessment, find out which are your dominant saboteurs, the different aspects of those saboteurs, so you can be on the lookout for them. You can begin to recognize them when they're in your head, and then you learn how to use the other muscles to start to counteract that. I do highly recommend that people do that saboteur assessment. It's very insightful, and people have light bulb moments going off and go, "Oh gosh, that really pegged me." And I've been using that. I use all these tools, so I'm my own guinea pig. I'm trained and certified in using these tools now, but at first it was just exploration and using them for me, for things that I wanted to work on and improve. And I got such great benefit from them that I said, I got to teach people this. I got to, help people get these kinds of results that I've gotten. So it started with hypnosis, and then the next thing was NLP, and then the next thing was EFT, and the latest one is the positive intelligence. So I use all these tools for myself because they're so valuable. They're so quick and effective, and more likely to be permanent. And then I teach them to other people and help to make sure that they're utilizing them effectively to get whatever changes they're looking for. So those are the 4 different techniques. Any questions right now about the positive intelligence or mental fitness? Okay, guess I've done my job well. If you're watching the recording and you do have questions, I'm always here to answer questions. You can email me at lisa@themindtrainingcenter.com. Happy to answer them for you. If you want to explore any of these things a little bit more, go ahead and ask for the freebies that I mentioned for each of them, or only one. If you only want one, you want to explore one, that's great. If you want to explore all of them, that's great. And if you want to talk with me about working privately to teach you these techniques and help you to utilize them for a particular goal that you have, a change you want to make or an improvement you want to make, be happy to ask to talk to you about that, do a free consultation with you to see if it's right. So we're going to wrap up today. I appreciate anybody who was online with me today and your attention. Hopefully this was a valuable use of your time. You learned something new. But the thing that I always say when I'm giving talks is knowledge is nice, but knowledge is not power. There's a saying that knowledge is power. That's not true. Knowledge is just information. Unless it's applied, it's not helpful, right? Unless you're going on like Jeopardy or something, right? So knowledge applied is what's power. So what I encourage you to do is take at least one thing that you learned today that you're willing to use to apply it to a particular challenge, issue, goal, and see how it works for you. Because doing the same thing the same way is the definition of what? Insanity. So get out of insanity, learn to use your powerful tool known as your brain, your mind, much more effectively, and you become more of the master of your own life and your own destiny. So thanks for joining me today. And again, if you want to reach out, it's Lisa@themindtrainingcenter.com. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.